I think we've established audio with Edmonton, where Alberta Premier Rachel Notley is in the legislature. Hopefully you're hearing me, Premier, are you?
I'm hearing you in the very lightest of ways, so I will do my best. It's very, very turned down, but I will. I will try.
All right.
And hopefully nobody walks by.
Give me your reaction to what Jim Carr said. Do you think he's got some tricks up his sleeve and things he can do to move this pipeline forward, or are you still very frustrated?
Well, you know, we've known for a long time that there's basically sort of three buckets of tools that the federal government has at their disposal. And what I've been saying basically is that they should be following Alberta's lead in our adoption of those tools, especially given that theirs are bigger and more effective. And so I know he talked about three areas. I think it's a little bit different between the two of us, but, you know, perhaps we'll ultimately end up in the right place. But basically, you know, the federal government can put economic and fiscal pressure onto the government of BC, just like the government of Alberta can and has already begun doing. The federal government can assert its jurisdiction legislatively or through the courts. Alberta, of course, has made that argument on numerous occasions, and we've won 14 out of 14. In some cases, the federal government has been a party. In other cases, they haven't. But that's another area. And then, of course, the third thing is where we basically put some money in, and we try to reduce the level of uncertainty that's being experienced by the investors. And so those are the things we're calling on the federal government to do. And I get a sense that they're starting to move. Well, we know that they've been working on these, but the key is it's got to be accelerated and it's got to move faster.
You called BC Premier Horgan today. I assume it was a tense conversation. What did you say to him about his pipeline blockages?
Well, honestly, we actually spoke yesterday, and there was no question it was a very frank conversation. I made him very clear that the government of Alberta was going to act very aggressively to protect the interests of Albertans, to protect the interests of all Canadians, and indeed to protect the interests of the majority of British Columbians, because I feel quite strongly that the economic value of this project very definitively supports the economic prosperity of many, many parts of BC. And so I told him that, and that we'd be moving forward on the legislation that gives Alberta the authority to strategically distribute our resources in a way that gets us the best value for the resources that we are the owners of. And so he knows that we are very, very determined. You know, it's not that, to be fair, what he said back is not too different from what he has said publicly. That notwithstanding, I'm still hopeful that we'll be able to find a path through all this.
Tell me about this plan. If you do curtail resources to British Columbia, I mean, really, realistically, aren't you just hurting Kinder Morgan by saying your pipeline is going to be throttled down? You're not hurting BC, are you?
Well, honestly, there's different ways that this can be done, and I don't want to show our hand entirely, but it's just a question of what product goes by what mechanism, what transportation, and/or less product. And certainly, we've factored in what the short-term cost of that might be, and we'll have more of those discussions with Kinder Morgan. But the reality, of course, is that we know that the price of gasoline in the Lower Mainland is very volatile right now, and it doesn't really take a lot to have an impact there.
You know, I've got a lot of fury back from Albertans that contacted me about this decision, and I'm wondering, do you worry about the rise of Alberta separatism again as a reaction if these oil sands are forced to remain deadlocked in Alberta?
Well, you know, I don't think that's the first go-to that I have. What I worry about, quite frankly, is the cohesion of the whole country. Because, you know, if for some reason this pipeline were not to go through, and I guess I don't worry too much about it because I'm confident that it will. But there's no question, as a country, we have to be able to act in the national interest. That's what being a country is. And as I've said before, this pipeline is in the national interest. And by that, I don't just mean 9 out of 10 provinces. I actually mean 10 out of 10 provinces, or plus, you know, the territories and the northern jurisdictions. It is in the best interests of all Canadians.
Are you saying it's too big to fail?
It is too big to fail. It is just too important, not only in terms of the benefits of this specific project, but in terms of the message it sends to investors about Canada as a whole, and our ability to provide certainty and to get the job done. And quite frankly, that's a risk for BC as much as it is to the rest of Canada.
All right. Interesting story. I hope it works out. Thank you, Rachel Notley. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Don.